Yeah, it says we're now live.
Let's see. I'm looking for some chats. 2 of 2. Oh, look at that. We're getting people lined up. We'll just do a little patter, as they say in the biz.
Is that what they say in the biz? Do they
I,
say patter?
I think so. I've only been in the biz for a very short time, so I can't be entirely sure. Hello, everybody. Do me a favor. Let us know if you can see and you can hear and you can all of that good stuff as people make their all right. Oh, I was like, all right, great. It's Owen. I mean, you are the most important part of this operation because it is ThursdAGE with Owen.
But if it's going from me here in Central California out to you, or sorry, Central Oklahoma, out to you on the west, I don't even know why is it California. I've never lived there. Uh, from here in Central Oklahoma out to you on the left coast, and then back here over Facebook, that suggests it can get reached anywhere.
That is true. We have the technology. Looks like Glass says, I see Owen. And you can hear Owen as well. Philip says, yes. And here as well. Wow. Look at
Oh,
that.
good, great.
We have audio. We have visual. We have charm. We have wit. You have Owen Casey Stevens, the star of this production that we call ThursdAGE, and I'm the disembodied voice of Troy. I get to hang out with Owen day and night, toiling over all manner of creative endeavor, including this one. Howdy, folks. Jones is here. Dover Cook is here. Good to see everybody. This is awesome. We are broadcasting to Facebook and to YouTube. We got a good show today, I think. A program.
As we're joined by all our, ready for it, Thurs devotees.
Thurs devotees. You know, we're picking a name. We want to have a sort of a catch-all. Now, you didn't like my suggestion of the Thursdays.
I
The
did not. I did not like that. Anything that is that easily turned into
turds.
Yeah, I was gonna go for a euphemism of some description, but
Leave it to me. Yeah, I don't know what we should do. I like that. What did I say? Uh, the Oh Noans. Thurs devotees. Okay, Dover says I like Thurs devotees. All right, that's good. That's good. Dover
it seems like
watching
it's
from
better than
YouTube.
Thursdolt.
Thursdolt. Oh no, you should never have said that.
See,
Now I can't think of anything else. Have you ever thought about like writing or doing something like that for a living?
no, I don't. My understanding is there's no money in it.
That is the truth. That is the truth. Jason says, "Hey, Owen,
Hey,
we'll
Jason.
as we go through the program today, if you've got, if anybody who's watching, if you've got an idea or something strikes you as amazing, tell us about it. Tell us what it is, and maybe we'll do it. Huh? Maybe.
I came up with some that seem good until you dive down. Like, there's been a big discussion about whether dude is gender neutral.
Yeah.
And
Huh.
I am well aware that there are people that use dude in a gender neutral manner, but that doesn't mean that it is universally gender neutral. And I think it hasn't reached that point yet. So I have to rule out Thursdude
Yeah.
because as much as I like the ring to it, I am not willing to do anything that suggests I will only accept one gender of fan.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, no, I
Um,
agree. I agree. Oh, real quick. Hey, Jason, just so you know, today's topic right now, we're talking about what is the catch-all term, the phrase, the nomenclature that kind of captures all of our folks that enjoy what we do. And so far, we've got Thursdolts and what did you say? Thursdolts. I can't think of anything
Thurs
else now.
devotee was the
Thurs
first thing you came up with, which
devotee.
is
Yes.
way too long.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that we're talking about today is playtesting tabletop RPG content and what that means, and from the development side, and then also to hear your thoughts on what makes a good test. for no particular reason we're bringing this up. Wink. But so, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's not a secret that we've got a Fantasy Age rule book coming out, and we're not quite ready to tell you its exact name and its exact nature, and we're way far away from being ready to tell you things like release dates. And I mean, I've worked on projects where we start with the release date and work backwards. For instance, Paizo, for the most part, you say, okay, this is the release date, and you work backwards. And there are upsides to that way of doing things, like you can tell people a year and a half in advance when a book's coming out. There are downsides, like there's a year and a half worth of stuff that could go wrong. For example, LJ says once you've decided on a term for phage fans, you can then need to determine the collective noun. So we could
Yeah.
have a stunt of fans, for example. Could be the
Oh,
collective
that's
noun.
really good. I like that. A stunt of Thurs devotees.
Yeah, it's like a blessing of unicorns. Unicorns? Wow.
I
And
like.
folks, I may not be my sharpest today. We went ahead and decided to broadcast, even though yesterday we were worried about armed insurrections against democracy, and today we're talking about elves. So
Yeah. It's a little bit of a whiplash, but desperately needed. And you on a bad day is me on my best day. So I mean, not even hardly. I mean, your intellect and charm would be all of the Thursdalians combined.
ooh, ThursdALien. I like ThursdAliens. When you said that, my wife, who's on the other end of the room, went, "Oh,
All right, we got some in the running. We're definitely taking submissions. But yeah, so why don't we dive into the topic? Because, I have the pleasure of working with you on this particular, a stunt for sure, Dover. Agreed. Dover says, I agree with that. Stunt of fans. I like it. But so my background is not tabletop role play games, but it is MMOs and
mhm,
RPGs and those sorts of things. And I've run beta tests and alpha, beta, that kind of testing for video games. There are similarities, but there's some
oh
pretty
sure,
distinct differences. Different sort of. I think that with games we can do a little bit more of a, I'll say, a cattle call. You just kind of throw it out into the world and hope that people will play. At the beginning, you do some small tests, but to really test it at scale, you need scale. For tabletop, it seems to be a little bit more like we definitely want scale, of course, but it seems more hands-on, more intimate, if you will.
well, one of the big differences in my experience between video game testing and tabletop game testing is that when you are doing video game testing, it is much more difficult for people to play the game wrong.
Mm-hmm.
By which I mean their misunderstanding of how the rules are supposed to work might be important because it might mean that they do stupid things, but they're not going to start doing more damage because they think they should do more damage. Um, in a video game, the thing works or the thing doesn't work, and you can certainly have cases where you're like, okay, we used as the icon for this button this huge explosion, and people think it should be a huge explosion when in fact it's this little pop, and so there's a intellectual disconnect there. But when they press the button, whatever the button's going to do, it does. Whereas
Right.
with a tabletop game, any tabletop game, when people are reading the rules and understanding them, one of the first things that you have to worry about is, are the rules clear enough that they are playing the game that you thought you wrote? So, for example, I have run into people who play any of the age systems, the adventure game engine systems, who, no matter how many times we've said otherwise, feel like you only get stunt points if when you roll doubles, one of the die that gets doubles is the stunt die. So they are not getting stunt points as often as they ought to, which means that their playtest feedback um, can be invalid in a way that is not immediately recognizable. Because if
Uh,
they say, I'm not getting stunt points nearly often enough, if you don't think to ask, well, what are you doing to get stunt points? Then you might go, oh, people aren't getting enough stunt points. Well, maybe we should say, at the third round of combat, you get 2 stunt points no matter what. Or throw in a 13th age escalation die or something. But that means that more intimate interconnectivity that you're talking about can be an important part of creating a feedback loop where someone says, here's a problem. And if that problem is something that you don't expect or you're surprised by or isn't obvious, you can ask them, what is leading to that problem? What are you doing that is
Yeah.
causing this difficulty? And then you can try and drill down on, did they read something wrong? Did we write something wrong? I'm
Mm-hmm.
absolutely not suggesting this is always the player, but things frequently can come up and can be hidden in a way that is less obvious for RPG stuff.
For video games, the other, I would say, bonus of being able to run a playtest environment that is entirely digital, you are giving feedback even if you don't give feedback, because we're watching what you do and we're looking at that data and all that kind of stuff. Jason, that's a really good question. When we look at playtest, I want to expand on this, but Jason, how long of a playtest is the norm for a company like Green Ronin and smaller companies like his, Two Guys Games? And so the other thing I want to add to that is, what are those phases and maybe how long those phases are? It'd be interesting to know.
That is a great question. And I will be upfront that I don't have a great answer. And the reason I don't have a great answer is the answer kind of is no matter what, as long as you can possibly manage. And then you have to start asking, well, what prevents it from being a 3-year playtest, for example, just to pick a randomly wild too long number. Making RPGs, tabletop RPGs, can be very expensive. And for the most part, you're not making money while you're playtesting. So playtesting is sort of a almost last step. Hopefully you playtest before like your final round of editing. So if you need to make changes for the playtest, an editor can take a look at those and try and make sure that you don't make things worse by editing the game after playtesting, or rewriting the game after playtesting. Sorry. I think you definitely want to run things at least a few weeks. A month is not a bad amount of time. You want to be in a place where you can say, okay, people have had an opportunity to look and absorb the rules. So part of the question is, how big a rule set are you asking them to look at? If your RPG is 2 pages, then they can probably do that the same day they play test. If your RPG is 2,000 pages, then even a month-long playtest isn't probably long enough for them to even really get to know the rules.
Yeah, you bring up two. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you bringing up the notion that the timing of when you do the test versus where you're at in the creation of stuff is really critical. It really you could find something pretty devastatingly debilitating if you wait too late. And if it's too early, you run the risk of burning out testers, or you run the risk of losing sort of your scope or your kind of feature set, because you're reacting to feedback before they've really had a chance to absorb a whole piece of product.
Well, and there's marketing and enthusiasm momentum that you have to worry about, right? Once I've announced a playtest, if 2.5 years later that game isn't out, people may not care enough to keep playtesting anymore, and
or they'll care enough to talk about it. Yeah. To say.
Charlotte Hamilton asked, is iterative playtesting during development viable? That's a great question, and ideally what you're doing is iterative playtesting during development, by which we mean iterative means that A leads to B leads to C, right? You iterate on it. So ideally you would say, hey, here's the game, or here's a part of a game, and I'll get to that in a moment, and have people play test and have them give you feedback, and you say, okay, I take that feedback, I incorporate it into a new version of the game, and then I play test that new version. So I have a new iteration of the game, and then they give me feedback and I do it again. And whether or not that is viable depends a lot on things like how much time you have and what resources you have, but also how big a playtest are you doing? When I worked on the Starfinder role-playing game, we had very early on in-house playtests. So we would have a very rough version of the game, and we might well say, hey, we've written up, here's the soldier and the Solarian class. We haven't worried about writing up weapons yet. We have not yet done spells, but we are basing all of this on Pathfinder. So make first level Starfinder characters for these 2 new classes we have. Grab stuff from Pathfinder to fill in the holes. Let's play that, and we're only stress testing the descriptions of the classes, and maybe, you know, if we had a new combat mechanism, for example, and then you can take some feedback on that and iterate a new version while you're trying to finish designing the game. So next time you can say, all right, now we do in fact have equipment for first and second level characters, and we've got rules for some alien species, and we've got rules for some unique spells.
You know, I think I want to jump in real quick. I think the important thing too is when we're testing these things, this is where I think it diverges greatly from video games. The video game piece of it, we've got a big budget. Some of these games get tested for 5 years before they're released.
Yeah.
A big team. There are, you know, I've worked on games with 50 staffers, and I've worked on games with 250 staffers. The difference is in tabletop, there are very few people. I mean, like it's a small endeavor as far as the administrative part of it. And the other thing too is, I really believe that this is the foundational piece of all of this. Is the test has to serve the product. Really, at the end of the day, there is no hard and fast, or there shouldn't be. And if anyone says there is, I think that they're probably fibbing. There shouldn't be a you must do these things or else in this order for this amount of time. And at the end of the day, it's do the test if the product's better and it feels better and you're getting momentum. And if not, then that's when you evaluate. But, you know, Owen, with folks like you are very conscientious about the, what is the word, the table feel?
Table feel is a term that Steve Kenson came up with recently. I ran into it recently anyway. He may have invented it years ago. And yeah, I think that's a very important element of it. And it's one of the things that it's hardest to know without playtesting. You can have a game and you can say, okay, the math works and I've covered the topics I wanted to cover and the mechanics all seem well described. But then you put it out in front of people, and if they go, all right, I hate this. This is no fun.
Yeah.
Then all of that other work is sort of wasted. It's useless. So you got to know, what is my playtest audience? So are we talking about a small group of people who are experts at role-playing games or are other game designers? If you're doing something like, obviously when we're doing a Fantasy Age playtest, there is a version of Fantasy Age out there already. So if I put out a new rulebook, whatever it is, right? Like when we do the Fantasy Age Companion, it has a bunch of new options in it, but there is a core fan base that already knows Fantasy Age. So we could give the Fantasy Age Companion to people that already knew Fantasy Age. If we decided we are going to do Fantasy Age, but we are going to add 27 winged dragons, mecha, and sentient scimitars, and that is what we're doing in a new rulebook, which, folks, that's not what we're doing. But if it was, I could take that and I could give it to invested existing fans and say, how does this work compared to what you're used to, compared to what you want? And that last bit is very important.
Owen, can you do me a favor? Repeat the one thing that you said. That's not what we're doing. What was the thing we're not doing?
27 winged dragons and sentient scimitars. That's the only part I remember. I was trying to find a list of ridiculous things that I knew weren't going to be in our new core rulebook.
I love it. The other thing I wanted to ask is the double-edged sword of bringing in your we'll call them enthusiasts, the people who know things in and out, who have experienced and played, maybe even have elevated their own tabletop RPG creation experience based on Fantasy Age or based on the title that you're working on. How do you balance that? You know, I will say this, there is a distinct personality difference between people who are purely role-play, tabletop role-play people and people who are play video games. And there's a Venn diagram where those circles can be pretty close. But I will say that our tabletop role-play person can be very passionate, I think is the word I'll use, about their feelings on a particular way that an NPC character is portrayed, and the nuances to the hairs coming out of their noses and those sorts of things. So talk to me a bit about balancing that against the need of a larger group.
Some of what you are talking about is just where you gotta gut check it and maybe get second, third, and fourth opinions. It can be very difficult to know when someone says this isn't fun, for example, or this is overpowered. Are they talking about a anywhere near objective issue that you can look at and analyze and improve? Or did they play test on a day where they happened to step on a nail and so they hated everything? Which,
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, I've stepped on nails. That's legit. But that is a difficult process to get through. And then you run into things where, like, maybe they have a weird corner case and you have to ask yourself, do I want to adjust the game for this corner case or not? There are people, and I play with some of them, who famously roll badly. So if you've got a game that involves die rolls to determine success, you can do all the math in the world and say, hey, look, on average, 1 out of 4 of your successful rolls should be producing stunt points, or 1 out of 3 rolls, whatever the actual end number is. And then you can have someone play, and they play 3 game sessions, and they don't even get stunt points once during that whole time. Now, that is statistically unlikely for any given person. But if a game is popular and a bunch of people are playing it, that will happen to someone. So you have to ask yourself, am I saying that unusual experience is simply not something we're supporting? If you can't roll slightly better than average, at least occasionally, this game just won't work well for you. Or is that a fault in the system where it depends on people to not roll badly for the primary feature of the game to ever come up? And it's especially important if you say, is it possible to succeed a lot and never have the fun elements come in? And of course, in Fantasy Age, it is, and all the adventure game engine systems. You could perfectly well roll really well. I rolled a 4, 5, and 6 are my 3 dice. That's a total of 15. That's a good roll. But if I'm consistently rolling 13, 14, 15, and I've got good modifiers and I am getting well, doing well and getting good results, but at no point am I ever getting stunt points, which is this important part of the game system, you can make a case that you have got a game design that has cut off unlucky people from a big chunk of the fun.
Yeah.
And having luck versus fun is one of the things you have to consider. And Modern Age, for example, kind of addresses that question by having a stunt attack that's saying, hey, look, there are things you can only do with stunt points, so we are going to give you this option where you can make an attack roll and get a couple of stunt points, which you can then apply to do these things. So if you have had, and Modern Age works a little differently, but if you have carefully selected some stunts for your character that are iconic and important to you for your vision of that character, and you are consistently never getting stunt points, we have given you this option to be able to take a stunt attack and earn some stunt points and do that thing. And now that level of luck, am I lucky enough to succeed and get stunt points rather than just succeed, is not as crucial to the game. Those are the kind of questions that it is very difficult to have any sort of objective answer. A lot of this is subjective. So we're talking about table feel and what do I want to support and what do I think is common. And that's just one of the places where sometimes a game company or a production line, and I've seen this happen fairly often, you'll have 2 or 3 different points of view of what will be best for the game. And the publisher just shrugs and says, well, I pay you to make that decision, so do your best. And there isn't necessarily an objective correct answer. There can be, and that can be the case in video games as well. I find that a fact, if you look at World of Warcraft has consistently changed how some things work in an effort to make the game more fun. Although I think they also consistently change things so that people don't become so ingrained in how the game works that they get bored, because there's a different fun feedback loop.
They also do something that is catering to the lowest, largest common denominator. So that you're kind of homogenizing, taking off some of the edges, which in some cases is really good. For the advanced player, maybe not the best, but But yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple questions here.
Sure.
Jason, I know that you had said, let's see. I'm not sure what brusting is, but I don't. I'm not sure we want players to brust anything that we do. I think maybe you mean bust or break. Are we talking about combat rules that don't work but can be reworked better? Help me out there, my friend. If you can clarify what that question is, a 29 neck dragon will be waiting for you in the post here shortly. A lot of fortune cookie talk. Owen, am I missing an Owenism?
Yeah, you are, and it's so we ordered for the day before Christmas. We had a Craftmas, and we ordered a ton of Chinese food because we wanted to have some for us on Christmas Eve and then Christmas Day. We didn't want to have to cook anything, so we were going to eat leftovers.
Right.
And since we were ordering a ton of Chinese food for Christmas Eve, we actually ordered it the day before that so we could tell them, hey, we want this much food at this time on this day, and here's the tip we're going to give you for going out when it's going to be cold and it could have been icy, etc. And the Chinese delivery place, which was Happy Family, for those of you that live here in Norman, Oklahoma, was very gracious and very nice, and they gave us some free soup and some extra soda, etc. They were really happy with this huge order. And then they gave us fortune cookies, and I mean, they gave us like practically a grocery bag of fortune cookies.
I
Like if we'd
love
had
fortune
40
cookies.
people here, we would. All right, so I've had leftover fortune cookies for a couple of weeks now, and I'm just not going to get through all these fortune cookies unless I make it a thing. So I have, since January 1st, been, actually a little before, been every day on Facebook eating and opening a fortune cookie and reading the fortune and opining on it, and it's like 1 to 3 minutes depending on the fortune cookie, and that's just the fortune cookie of the day. So that's what Jason and a couple other people maybe are referring to. It has recently been sort of my low impact, quick engagement with people through a video source.
Super fun and smart, and also I love fortune cookies. I could live on fortune cookies. I bought I think it was basically a giant garbage bag filled with fortune cookies, and I finished those off at about an evening. So I feel that. And nice of the, what was it? The Happy Family giving happy cookies. Rain brings something up that I like. Rain, apologies if I mispronounce your name, but it looks like Rain LeBeau says that my incredibly unlucky wife appreciates this conversation. So this is really interesting, but it's true, isn't it? I mean, isn't it just an irrefutable truth that there are just some people who will always roll badly?
I used to believe that no one rolls badly all the time, and that you would just have weird statistical streaks, right? I rolled
Right.
badly for a game or two or a month or two. I literally had a friend, Carl, who we've mentioned before, track every die roll he made. I believe for at least a couple years. I could be either overstating or understating, but certainly for a really long time, he literally had a journal where he was tracking what his die rolls were in gaming, and had the proof that his die rolls were well above average for a long period of time. And if you have something and is still, normally you can depend on Carl to not roll as well as other people are. And he's a great gamer and he's a great player and he has very successful characters, but he has to work harder than other people to
Right.
do well with those characters. And as an experienced gamer, I mean, he's got his own RPG publishing credits, right? He worked on the EverQuest tabletop role-playing game, and he's done stuff for Super Genius, Rogue Genius Games. He will look at a game system and understand it and analyze it, and he will ask himself questions like, what choices can I pick that will minimize the impact of bad luck? To look at D&D or Pathfinder, for example, his characters frequently have magic missile because there's no saving throw and there's no roll to hit. So the worst that can happen is he doesn't do a lot of damage, but he will hit and do damage with that attack. And he is tactically minded enough that his character will frequently be running around and will say, okay, well, this person's almost dead, but they're still around. And he can say, okay, well, if they're almost dead, even if I roll badly, magic missile will probably take that character out. But he is someone that has his real world life experience, and my observation of this experience over decades of playing with him leads me to consider, is this game going to be fun for that percentage of people who just won't roll well. They're out there. And I don't necessarily believe in luck as a power, but I do believe in statistics. And if you've got a really popular game with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of players, statistics tell us that a few of those people are going to roll badly during their entire career playing that game. And I think it's worth, as a game designer, asking yourself, do I or do I not want to support a bad die roll experience?
Well, how do you do that?
Well, as I said, you can look at things that give you options that you don't have to roll well to succeed with, and those options aren't necessarily things that have as big an impact as rolling well, but they can be fallbacks. The stunt attack was an example. If you've got an option to help someone else, and you can say, hey, if your character takes their turn, if they take a major action, to use Fantasy Age terminology, to stand next to someone and help them out, you can give them a +2 bonus to all of their tests next round. That is an option that does not require your luck to be relevant. And you can say, well, I'm not rolling well, I want to make sure I impact something. They tend to roll well, or they've got a better option. I will stand next to them and I will help them. Or I will position myself to try and give flanking bonuses, to go back to D20. Where I'm standing, I can choose to go there. I don't have to make a check to do it. And then I can have an influence over the game. You can also make sure that your game doesn't have dice and die rolls determining absolutely everything, right?
Right.
A lot of role-playing games, you've got the question, do we want to require diplomacy checks for people to get along with other people, or to gather information, or to explore the jungle? And there are multiple schools of thought about this. Some want everything to be connected to die rolls so that I can play someone who is convincing and conniving and sneaky, even if I am personally not good at those things, just like I don't have to personally be good at archery to play a good archer. And then there are people who say, well, it's a role-playing game and you're taking a role, and you don't have to be a good archer, but you have to decide what target am I taking and who am I standing next to. There's some combat tactics there. And as a result, we should not have everything boil down to a die roll. We should be able to say, hey, if you've come up with a smart idea, or if you personally are convincing, that the GM can say, well, that doesn't even require a test. You have made a true, obvious statement about why these people should support you, so they are going to. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer to any of those things, but they are the sort of thing that you want to look at. And again, when you're doing a playtest, they're the sort of things you want to ask your playtesters, both, how did you handle this? But there are also times where you want to tell your playtesters, please check out this specific thing. If I have added a new maneuver, for example, if we take Modern Age's stunt attack and we put it on Fantasy Age, if you're running a play test, you probably want to point that out and say, we've created this new option. Please, even if you wouldn't normally, if you are playing this in a play test, please have characters try this and tell us what its effectiveness level is. Do they get enough stunt points? Do they not get enough stunt points? Do we not have enough interesting stunts to give you an option? Did we create a new stunt that we weren't thinking about the fact that we've got stunt attacks now? So if you try a stunt attack and you have this thing that we thought would only come up occasionally, you can do it all the time, now it's too powerful. Those are all things that you can turn to your playtest group and say, we want you to make sure that you roll characters rather than just take the point option, or we want to make sure that you get involved in multiple fights. Especially for Fantasy Age, you can also say, please don't just test fights. We'd like you to take a look at the exploration stunt system and the social stunt system, and how does that work with how you're role playing. And when you give us feedback on those things, let us know, how often did the stunts for those encounters come up? Did they add to the fun? Did they reduce the fun? Have we added so many? Do you love stunts, but now we've added 57 stunts to the game, so it takes an hour and a half for anyone to decide what stunt to use?
Right.
Those are all things that you can specifically turn to your playtesters and say, please give us feedback on this thing.
I like that. So yeah, Rain says that in their community, when folks rolled threes at Pathfinder Society, we called it "I rolled a Jessica," which I'm presuming is Rain's wife. That is, yeah, no, I'm glad to hear this, because and also just the branching out into to the other aspects. It's not just about luck, or it's about there's a bunch of different things going on in the social exchange that's happening, defined by resolving conflict with three six-sided dice, and that it sounds simple on its face, but it's really a very complex thing that has everything to do with, did I step on a nail this morning? Do I have a cold? Do I like the people I'm playing with? Am I, did something happen that's great? Did something happen to someone that I, care about that's at the table with me and they're upset about it? Or, all kinds of stuff. And then, just that whole role play aspect. I mean, that's the, people are wild cards in and of them just for being people, but then you throw some RPG stuff on there and it's like, what? Like, you just don't know where things are going to go. I wanted to ask about. Go ahead, please.
To be clear, you said, "Am I playing with people I don't like?" I would recommend you not play role-playing games with people you don't like.
Yeah, for me it changes though. Like, I'll be playing with somebody and I'm like, I liked you 5 minutes ago and I don't anymore.
I'm okay with playing with people that you neither like nor dislike and don't know that well as the way to get to know them.
Yeah.
But if you already know them and you don't like them, unless you are making a way more concerted effort to be a better person than I am, games for me tend not to be fun if I'm doing them with people I actively dislike.
True that. No, and that's a really good point. And I think something that's important, I want to move into this area of conversation because I think that it is beneficial for both the developer and for the player. When we talk about the relationship that's going on in a playtest between the publisher and the playtesters, what do you think are some of the key things that players ought to know in order to navigate that, to be successful and to get something out of it?
So the first thing I want to tell people is that a playtest is not like just playing the game. You can just play the game, but frequently a publisher running a playtest will ask people to look at some specific things. So you want to come up with those things, even if they wouldn't naturally evolve in the course of you playing. Secondly, you want to kick all the tires. So it might well be worth it if you're with a group to tell them, I know that normally you all would decide to take 5 game sessions analyzing the whole with a big sign that says adventure and an arrow pointing downward. And we can do a little of that to see if the game supports that. But after we've done a little of it, we need to get down into the adventure hole and see how the game actually handles those parts of the experience.
The adventure hole, you say?
Yeah, the adventure hole.
Yes, let's get
a lot of adventures occur in adventure holes.
That's true.
It's a surprisingly common trope, the adventure hole.
If we have any artists,
sign is less common.
That's true, very true. If we have any artists hanging out in stream, the quote was, "Get down into the adventure hole." So, yeah. See what you can come up with.
It's also important to note that a playtest often is presenting things that the publisher isn't sure about. So if you are looking at a series of rules and you go, well, if they make all these changes, I'll hate it. Don't panic. The reason for the playtest is to see how people are responding to those changes. And they might not even have an intention of making all those changes, but they want to see what they do and what people's feedback is and what suggestions they have. And as far as suggestions, another really important thing, if you're playtesting, playtest the rules you were given. Do not make changes and playtest the changes.
There we go.
Extremely common thing, especially for tabletop RPGs, for me to get feedback when I'm running a playtest that says, you wrote up this rule and you say this action gives a +4 bonus, and that isn't enough. So we ended up making it a +8 bonus. And by the way, none of the rest of the options were ever picked. Well, of course, none of the rest of the options were ever picked. You've doubled this bonus. And that means that all the rest around, Stephen Jones says there's a tavern built around an adventure hole. And that's entirely true in the Forgotten Realms. There's a tavern built around an adventure hole. And I think WizKids is doing this massive miniature set of it. Anyway, don't be the person that makes the changes and then give feedback based on the changes. If you all aren't sure how a rule is supposed to go, if it is unclear to you how it works, by all means, pick a solution and let us know, hey, 1, this wasn't clear, and 2, this is the ruling we went with, so that we can look at
solve
that
for
with
it.
all the other feedback. But a playtester's job isn't to playtest their changes. If you have suggestions about ways to make the game better, by all means, give that along with your feedback. But if you implement those and then keep playtesting, you're no longer playtesting something that we can compare to everyone else's feedback and to our notes, etc. all we can do at that point is say, well, I'm glad you're having fun with your set of house rules. We can look at those house rules, but we can't compare that feedback to everything else. So you have now moved away from playtesting what we needed feedback on to playtesting the thing that you decided to do.
And that's particularly,
By all means, do
yeah.
house rules and have a good time, but just be aware that you have reduced the usefulness of that feedback to us.
Right. Well, then it becomes, those sorts of moments in time, I think, you hope to solve for them by setting expectations and really kind of clarifying. But I think that going into a deeper discussion about it, there is on both sides of that coin, developers and testers, there is a piece of this that is critical to the play experience, and that is being accessible, being able to hear, this just isn't fun. I mean, this isn't meant to be, like you said, it's not just playing, but the idea is to gauge the funometer, the phonometer, if you will. And if you're not registering, we need to know that based on the experience that's before you. And so that's a really important piece of business. Now, when talk about, you don't have to name names or confess crimes of the past, but when we talk about mistakes that developers can make, what are some things that that you think are important considerations when preparing this kind of experience for your most beloved or most engaged players?
I think it is pretty normal to be very nervous about putting a incomplete version of a game in the hands of anybody, and especially anybody that isn't part of the same company. You are giving people an opportunity to form opinions about a product before the product is done. I think communicating that this product is not finished, we know it's not finished, and that is why we are getting feedback at this stage, is important. At the same time, I think it's worth remembering that if people are choosing to playtest your game, it's because they are interested in having a good time. So I think there's this careful walk that you don't want to assume bad faith on their part, but you also want to make sure you explain what you're doing and make it easy for them to be the people that give you the feedback you want. When it comes to receiving feedback as a publisher or developer, I think the old fiction advice, kill your darlings, is something that you really have to keep an eye on. It is very easy as a developer to say, I really like this idea. So I've got this hook. Here's a rule hook, and I like it. I like how it's going. I think it's neat. I find it interesting. And you can end up getting a bunch of feedback, all of which says that hook isn't working well with all these other things we like about the game. It can be very tempting. Your first instinct as a developer can be to say, well, I will change everything about the game so that it will now work well with the hook, because the hook is the whole point. But if people come to you and they say, we like everything else that doesn't work with the hook, and we don't like the hook, the fact that you love it, that it is something you created or something you selected or developed for this interaction, may be why you like it. The very fact you like it means it's more likely to connect to exactly the way you think or your experience, or even if there are role-playing games you've played and there's one thing that really bothered you about you that you hated that you wanted to fix, it might be that one thing is in a whole bunch of role-playing games because a whole bunch of people like that one thing. So you've got to very dispassionately, if you can, step back and say, what is best for the game? What are they actually telling me about the play experience? What do we have time to do?
Right.
I have been part of some game redesigns where we were very late in the development, and we're in editing and we're in layout, and things are going to the publisher within days or in some cases within hours, and had people say, okay, here's this one thing that we've tweaked, let's put it before people, and had just the worst playtest feedback. I have literally had things where people said, I didn't like this, it made me angry, it made me feel dumb, and if this was my first experience with this game, I would never pick up anything else with this brand name on it ever again.
Wow, yeah.
And when you get that, you got to look at it and say, am I the bad guy here? Have we created something that is going to ruin this game? And if so, if we're very, very, very short on time, how do we fix it? And what are the repercussions of fixing it? Because we've got a whole game stretching out. And if one person tells you that out of 20, 50, whatever, you might just go, okay, this game is not for this person, right? If you are doing Fantasy Age and they say, I hate the fact that there are stunt points, okay, then you're probably not going to like Fantasy
This
Age.
ain't your game, yeah.
That is a good chunk of this game. But if I did something to stunt points in a new version of the game, if I did something to stunt points in an expansion book or whatever, and out of 20 playtesters, 19 of them told me I would never touch this game again if I read this, no matter how clever I think I am, that is a case where I have got to say, okay, either I am miscommunicating this, or I am missing something, or I love something that is not going to be beloved by the general public, and existing fans of this game are telling me we'll ruin it. So there are no hard and fast rules for this sort of thing. That's one of the reasons why publishers tend to trust people with experience, because there aren't objective degrees in tabletop playtesting. You can't look at someone and say, oh, you've got a PhD in D20ology.
Right.
So experience and a track record speaks for a lot to publishers. I've seen what this person does. I've worked with them. And that can make it very difficult for new people to break in. But you do that. One of the things that experience teaches you is you've got to at least listen to people. Don't get angry. Don't cut them off. Listen to what they have to say, and then decide, are they right or are you right? Are they your target audience or are they outside your target audience? How do you want to proceed with that feedback? Not every piece of feedback is something that is actually going to cause you to change a game. I have even had feedback where the fact that someone disliked a thing in a game and the way they expressed that dislike convinced me that that was the thing I wanted in the game. I have had someone, for example, say, the way you've written this game, it is very unlikely that a group of players are going to have all their characters killed even as often as once every 3 sessions. Well, I don't want your characters killed once every 3 sessions. I'm not looking for that experience as a game designer. And I get that this person is telling me he thinks the game's not lethal enough, but what if he is looking for is a game that will, 1 every 3 sessions, kill all the players' characters? Then I'm not designing this game for him.
Yeah, I mean, what is this? A British
follow-up questions, but
I was going to say, what is this? A British, like a British a series where they, just run it for 8 episodes and kill everybody involved? I mean, come on.
I have had long conversations with apparently serious gamers, groups of gamers who feel like the point of a role-playing game is to play a few sessions till everyone is killed off, and that is how a role-playing game ends, and that is your sign to move on to the next game.
Bleak.
And they are, if you look at first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and that's what introduced them to the game, and they played it for a while, you could see how they could decide that's how the hobby works. A first level magic user has 1d4 hit points. Ooh, I rolled 1. Great. If you're hit by anything, you pass out and probably die. That's the game. And if you compare that to other kinds of games, right? If you had a bunch of people playing Monopoly saying, well, I don't like this variant of Monopoly because it means everyone's going to go broke except one guy. That's the point of Monopoly.
Right. End of life, I guess. Of real life as well. So everyone's like, why do we fight when we play Monopoly? It's like, well, it's a little too close to home, I think. Hey,
I have a piece of Adventure Hole art, Troy.
You're kidding me.
I do not. I am not. No, I have a piece of Adventure Hole art. Let me see.
Stan Brown, you beautiful human being, you. I swear.
Let's see. There's going to be a brief delay, folks, while I try and figure out how to bring you all to the Adventure Hole.
Get in the Adventure Hole. I'm working on some taglines like "Bring it to the Adventure Hole" or
"Can I share my screen?"
I think you might ruin our camera if you do.
do it. Would I really?
I
Okay.
think so.
Can I paste this to you in Slack?
Yeah. Do that, and we'll do a switcherooski. But
There we go.
Jason, it was Jason, wasn't it? Yeah, Jason Waltman brings up a couple really interesting points. One of them, he wanted to know some horror stories about playtesting, and for instance, in one video game session, we were we were just on the cusp of rolling into a public beta. We pushed out our build, and the install deleted people's hard drives. Literally the whole hard. I've never seen a thing like it. It was just a mistake in the way that it installed itself into the root and just to install itself over everything. Pen and paper, a little less dire, a little less like me. The damage is only emotional.
I mean, if I release a pen and paper RPG that can delete people's hard drives, that will make me more money than one that doesn't. But I don't see the way of doing that offhand.
Yeah, no. So talk to me about this is a little maybe even heading into the gossipy territory, and heaven forfend, we would never. But do you have any recollections of sort of things, maybe more productively we can say, things that you wish you could have done differently?
Oh, sure. I don't. There's a saying, and it applies to more than just RPG creators. It applies to artists of all kinds, but it's pretty common, which is RPG designs aren't finished; they escape. So there is no game or game supplement or adventure or probably even blog post I've ever released where I did not at some point upon reviewing it again think, ooh, I could have done this better.
So talk to me. Oh, go ahead, please. Go on.
The thing about any game or supplement or rule or adventure is until people are playing it, it serves no purpose. So I would rather have an imperfect game being played by people than a perfect game that I put the last sentence on 2 seconds before my deathbed and then gets burned with the rest of my possessions and no one ever sees it. That platonic perfect game that no one ever gets to play doesn't do anyone any good.
Right.
So I accepted a long time ago that it is better to put out a good game than hold on to and strive for a perfect game. In this case, perfection is the enemy of the good.
So in on that subject of perfection, the concept of kind of a running errata, sort of errata. Am I saying that right? Errata. Okay.
Let's call the whole thing off.
Let's do it. This is okay. I can't wait to share this. But I am curious about that relationship. People seem to be fairly comfortable with, with video games as well. It's like it's a never-ending update. And finding that balance between fixing a bug and changing something that's fundamentally wonderful or that everybody loves that they may not even be aware of. But when it comes to how do you reconcile that people have their print, they'll have their tome and they open it and, there's a typo or a missing picture or, and it happens across every product known to humankind. But how do you, is it just are people just super comfortable with it? It's not a thing that really worries anybody.
It varies wildly.
Yeah.
It varies. I mean, I did a series of tweets that I still occasionally do and I do it on Facebook, so I guess social media. That's hashtag Real Game Industry. And the very first one of those I did was, no, the RPG book that you're annoyed with would not have been perfect if it had gotten, in quotes, one more editing pass. So there are totally people who are of the opinion that if there is a typo or a missed, if something says see page XX or whatever, that is proof that the people making it were lazy or incompetent or cheap. And that's just not the case. But there are people who feel that if they are paying for the product should be perfect. And there are also people who shrug and say nothing's perfect.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and especially in a creative endeavor like this, I
tend to agree with them.
When you're dealing with something like this that is Sorry. Sorry, I'm trying to talk and I'm looking at this piece of art. It is mwah, that's a chef's kiss. You can't really hear it because I don't have a body, but I'm gonna yeah, this is wowzers, good stuff. But you know that creative endeavor is important. There are people who are sticklers, and there are people who are going to be, and I really do enjoy those folks to a point, to a degree, if you will. But I am wondering when you're dealing with the kinds of things that we're dealing with, where people can create a perfect world within their mind of kind of how they want to, you know, to maneuver through a tabletop role play IP. There can be a really contentious relationship there, and we've kind of touched on it briefly. But how do you know, just from your vantage point, and this is, I think, more of a look into what happens on this side of the screen of the DM screen when you're updating a product or a you know a story that's been around for a long time. People are in love with it. They've grown up playing it. What do you do to kind of take that into consideration, and how difficult can that ultimately be at times?
There's this concept of sacred cows in when you're doing a revision or an update or even an homage, a concept that is so beloved and integral to the table feel or to the shared experience of a game that you can't touch it. There are also people that say sacred cows make the tastiest hamburgers. So you want to take the sacred cow and grind it up and serve it with bacon and cheese.
Oh, yummy.
I think you've got to look at what is it about that thing that makes it a important part of the play experience to whatever segment of your target audience feels it's important, and how much does what you're trying to do in an update or in a revision or an homage require you to make changes. And then, you know, cut the Gordian knot. Do the thing that you think is most important. And again, if you've got time, play test it and see what kind of feedback you get. One of the things that I remember people complained about with early 4th edition D&D was that Magic Missile did not automatically hit. And it didn't automatically hit because that didn't work with the math that they had built the entire game engine on. But there were players who were like, look, it can do less damage, it can have a shorter range, but what Magic Missile is an iconic first level magic user / wizard spell that always hits. And if I can't have that, then I don't feel like I'm playing D&D. And I want that feeling for D&D.
Right.
And if I recall, they literally eroded it to a new edition that always hit because of the pushback on that. On the flip side, again, 4th edition D&D didn't have gnomes as player character races or species options originally. That ancestry wasn't an option, and they only changed that when they were adding new ancestry options. So there were a lot of people that were very upset about it, and other people shrugged and went, you can be a dwarf, you can be a halfling, we really don't need gnomes on top of that. So you measure the feedback and you ask yourself, what's the cost? What's the cost or what's the benefit? And you make a decision. Sometimes the cost is we don't have room. When we were working on, again, Starfinder, there was a question about whether we were going to put in the ancestries for the fantasy options that were common in Pathfinder that weren't going to be as common in Starfinder. So dwarves, elves, gnomes, half-elves, half-orcs. And we had a lot of meetings about that. But in the end, we decided that even if the people who say we don't have to have them in are right, we don't have to have them in there. In the size of this rule book, we're talking about like 6 pages of content. So we can make room for those 6 pages. We can decide to do that. That cost isn't that high, but we're going to put them somewhere else in the book to make clear these are not the most supported options. And we wanted that to be clear because there are players, and I know it's a weird behavior to some minds, but there are players who only want to be tackling the things that are going to be supported with new content. They want the next release, the next adventure, the short story to specifically be touching on the options they've selected. So if you're going to have a set of core ancestries and you say, these are the things that we expect most players to pick, and as a result, that's what we're assuming most people have picked when we move on, you don't want to throw in there, and here are some options that we think almost no one will pick and will be largely ignoring, without somehow marking that those are, from you as the publisher or developer's mind, different.
I feel that. So here's a question for you then. How do you manage a disappointed subset of player?
Honestly, and that's all I can say, right? You don't try to handle them. Have a conversation with them, and if they're disappointed in a new version, you can always point out that the old version exists. Pathfinder 2nd Edition did not go out there with little paper constructs, hunt down and burn all copies of the 1st edition of the game. Modern Age is a different version of the Age engine than Fantasy Age, but it didn't hunt down and destroy Fantasy Age.
Mm-hmm.
If you liked Dragon Age, which is where the Age system was first used, those books are out there. If you bought them and they're on your shelf, they're still on your shelf, and we not only cannot but do not want to take them away from you. Nothing is going to make everybody happy. You do the best you can, and then you just try and be upfront and honest and gentle with anyone who doesn't like the decision you made. And you can listen to them, and maybe they're right, and maybe when you're doing new material later, it's something you can touch on, right? We didn't, in Fantasy Age, we didn't originally have any beast folk races. There aren't any ancestries for cat folks and rat folks and bird folks. And then the Fantasy Age companion came along, and we put those things in because we were able to expand to new options. There wasn't a race of dragon-like lizarding reptilian humanoids in Fantasy Age, and then the companion came along, and so they were one of the things we added because some people wanted it. I try to be very accessible and listen to what the public wants. Some of that is being compassionate, some of that is being a good game designer, and some of that is just greed. I want to exchange this idea to them for money. So for me, pragmatically, it makes sense to listen to what they're saying we would give you money for. Sometimes playtesting is about what thing could we add or what thing have we added that people are super excited about, and they're like, oh, you put this thing in here, I don't care about anything else, I will now give you little tiny slips of paper with pictures of dead presidents on it so that you will give me an 8.5 by 11 hardback book that gives rules for pretending to be a new kind of elf.
I love it.
It's a weird thing that is our hobby and our industry, but the very fact that it is weird means that a lot of these are subjective rather than objective value propositions.
Right.
And I want to listen to the fan base so they can tell me what they will pay me for.
And interestingly enough, also there is that subjective piece, but there are oftentimes that there are people who are very enthusiastic and want to recreate a moment and all of that without necessarily understanding that the reason they got to that moment was because of the mechanisms and the solutions and the resolution of conflict. That's the magic, right? And triumph is not just everything paved in gold and here's your Twinkie.
That's another case where I think different players and play groups want different things. There are people who very much want the game to make certain things difficult because when the game rules make that thing difficult and they succeed, they feel a real sense of accomplishment. That's a legitimate desired play experience. There are also people who enjoy telling the story where that difficult thing happens and don't want the game rules to prevent it from happening when they think it's good for the story. That is also a legitimate desired play experience, and normally a tabletop role-playing game does not support those two experiences equally well. And I am absolutely not telling people who want to be able at any moment to say, hey, wouldn't it be really cool if Vlarg the implacable decapitated the 27-headed dragon now? And everyone around the table goes, yeah, that'd be really cool. And they agree, since we all said it was really cool, it happens, and they cheer. If they're having a good time playing that game,
More power,
I'm not
yeah.
telling them they're playing wrong.
Right.
But I do want to make sure that it is obvious to them if they come to a game where decapitating the 27-headed dragon is extremely difficult, unlikely, or impossible, for them to be aware that the game system is not designed to support the experience they're looking for, and Blarg the Implacable probably ought to move to a more narrative game system.
Blarg the Implacable. I think that given even just spend a short time, like maybe 5 minutes with you, Owen, and I will tell you, Blarg will want to join you. Blarg will get into your adventure hole, and with that, I would love to share. Stan, honestly, my friend, this is magnificent. Let's see. I'm going to hope to transition without hanging up on Owen and launching missiles into
if you
whatever.
hang up on me, folks, thanks, and enjoy professional cartoonist Stan's art. That's fine. It's worth seeing.
All right, here we go. Let's see. Can everybody see it? Can everybody hear? That is amazing. I was thinking that maybe one of the ideas for we didn't really settle on a name, but adventure, whole, like maybe we can call our fans, people who enjoy the program, a-holers. No, is that good?
I'm going to suggest. No, I'm going to suggest no. I'm going to suggest no. We don't go with that.
I would never. Only love, only love. You're lucky. Oh yeah, it's so good. We'll leave that up there a little bit, and we'll talk to Stan about. We got a couple things Stan's worked on that we want to utilize in some public fashion, and so we'll work with you, Stan, on that. But absolutely adore it. I love it. Doodles to order. Your doodles. Jeez. Doodles, Stan said. Wow.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, that, like I said, no kidding. Stan's a professional cartoonist, and he's one of my favorites. And a gamer, and a writer, and an editor, and a bon vivant. But yeah, both Stan and Jacob Blackman have done some tremendous art for this stream that I personally think we ought to maybe pay them for and put on T-shirts. So we'll see what we can make happen.
Yeah. Maybe put on T-shirts and share a bit of, we should figure that out, and I would like to talk to both
for
of them.
all our beloved ThursdAliens.
ThursdAliens. Jason says age holes. Jonesy says ageists. These are solid ideas. You are definitely you're around the target. I feel I really do like ThursdAliens. I really do. But let's ponder all of that, and with that, say, Owen, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Troy.
This is a joy to hang out with you and to hang out with all of our ageologists. ThursdAliens keeps coming back, but we'll get there. But hanging out and being able to have these conversations, I think, is an important part of doing the work. But it's also an important part of just exploring all the new opportunities and connecting with people and really having a joyful dialogue about things like adventure holes. And I think that's important stuff. We're doing the work. Owen, thank you so much. We got here nearly on time with nary a tech issue. We showed art without jettisoning you off into space, or into into a lava flow, and we reached the end. We're even over time because we have so many great things to say and so many great questions to answer. Stan, Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to everybody who is watching and who will be watching in the future. Owen, any final words before we hang up our adventure cloak? I was going to say adventure hole, but we carry that with us all the time.
I suspect that there's an orc and a pie in the adventure hole. Just this. Obviously, if we're thinking about playtests and we're talking about playtests, watch this space for news about playtests. And if you think you and yours should be on a list for people that got any playtest information first, I recommend you contact Troy at letsplay@greenronin.com and make your pitch. And then we'll be here hopefully every Thursday for all our ageologists. I kind of like that one.
Ageologist is good, yeah.
Ageologist is good. And we'll be in touch.
Absolutely, yeah, and to Parrot Rain, who says, "Be safe, everybody. Yeah, wear your mask. Let's get through this. Let's get through this and get to tabletop gaming face to face. I miss it. I miss it. We'll
Watch your
be
distance. Wear your
Yep.
mask.
Wear your
Wash
mask.
your hands.
We're almost there. We're almost there. Owen, thanks again for climbing into the adventure hole with me. We will talk to everybody. We'll be back next Thursday for ThursdAGE with Owen Casey Stevens at 2 p.m. Pacific. This coming Monday, Mutants and Masterminds Monday with Crystal Frazier, Steve Kinson, and your disembodied boy Troy. It is going to be a blast. We've got some great things planned for the new year, and but the most important thing is that we have you there with us. So join us, and we'll have a good time, and we'll talk to you real soon. Bye.